Oi guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. Big updates today at Mercedes with reports emerging that George Russell's contract situation is very similar to Lewis Hamilton's, the 7-time world champion terminating his 1+1 deal in order to join Ferrari next season. Rumour has it Russell has a similar contract. That means either he can terminate the deal if a better offer was to be on the table, or Mercedes, were Max Verstappen to join, could potentially throw Russell very easily onto the sidelines for next season. Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, drama everywhere today, including on the Andretti side. The US House Judiciary Committee is still pushing for answers on this. If you guys aren't familiar, as Sahil Kapoor and others have been reporting, I'll leave all the links, as always, in the description box below. But effectively, the US government are getting involved in what they see as, or at least some see as, an anti-competitive conduct situation with F1 denying Andretti's entry. Of course, the US kind of Senate and House are sitting there thinking, right, hang on a second, we've got this General Motors Andretti collaboration trying to get into Formula 1, an entity that is owned by Liberty Media, that are traded on the US stock exchange. They are potentially in a position to have to provide answers. So I don't know where this pressure is going to go. There's theories that, well, it's not really going to go that far, but they are still going to push for answers on what some see as an unfair rejection. So, well, FOM will come up with their answers. They will seemingly try their best to stop Andretti coming in, but Mario Andretti and others certainly have the support of many in the US government, which is probably going to be quite substantial, you would think, over time. Drama again at the FIA. It's not just Formula 1 and the teams that get involved in drama. It's Mohammed Ben Sulayem's organisation as well. There's been so much happening with him over the last few months, overshadowed somewhat by the Red Bull and now the Adrian Newey situation. But Natalie Robin, FIA Chief Executive Officer, has gone after 18 months. We've seen this so many times over the last few months. Senior figures just call it a day. Now, there's no rumours really as to exactly why she's departed. We can certainly speculate on them, but there has been rumours that other individuals are left because they just don't feel like anything they do gets anywhere because of the structure of the organisation. So the FIA is a shambles, Formula 1's a shambles, but we're still watching for the sidelines. There was, of course, also talk about the driver market for next season, because there was a commentator the other day at this race who mentioned Andrea Kimi Antonelli, soon to be announced, and then he stopped before saying Williams. Now, I think people were saying, oh, well, he must know something we don't. Firstly, he probably doesn't, and I think he's probably joking here, to be honest, based on the way that he says it.
Andrea Antonelli 2022, the soon-to-be announced, actually I won't finish that sentence.
But also, I believe when this race happens, it had not yet been said by Toto Wolff and James Vowles that this is definitely not a thing yet. But James Vowles did say Antonelli will definitely not be in the car for Imola. So Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Mercedes Junior, very talented driver. I mean, apparently he did a recent test in the W13 and absolutely mesmerised the engineers, which apparently happens every time he gets in a car. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a Formula 1 driver. The question is, when is he ready? All these other questions that go around Antonelli, and understandably so. But, let's be honest, if he is world champion caliber driver, he'll figure it out. If he's thrown into a seat, it might not be the best idea. There's debate on it. But Antonelli, I think, will get a drive. It probably will be a Williams drive, although does he massively fit what Williams are trying to be in the future? Maybe not. But if Mercedes give them massive discounts on their engines, then maybe there is an argument that makes sense. Or potentially Antonelli straight into Mercedes, which we still believe is plan A for Toto Wolff. It was rumoured a while ago that Antonelli is plan A for Mercedes to replace Hamilton, and Alonso was plan B. Then as soon as it became clear that Verstappen was potentially available, of course that's plan A, and Alonso no longer is available. So, assuming Verstappen doesn't go there, we have to recognise that Antonelli is still probably the most likely Hamilton replacement, although 6 months in a Williams wouldn't be a bad idea. So James Vowles says he's definitely not joining for Imola. But he didn't say he's definitely not joining, and he certainly didn't say that we're definitely not replacing Sargent, because they will. The question is who, and will it be mid-season? Let me just quickly update that graphic below my face here to say Imola, because that is, of course, the next Grand Prix. But Audi as well, they have actually made it very clear. This is Alessandro Aluni-Bravi, who's their team representative, not team principal. He actually just straight up said, basically, that Sainz is their top target. Everyone knows there's a driver available in the market, a top driver. That is Carlos Sainz. So he still is their intended driver. However, we believe that effectively Sainz has been trying to not give them an answer immediately because he wants to weigh up the Red Bull situation, and who knows, there might be other drivers in that conversation rather shortly. Magnussen will not be one of them. The question is for Magnussen whether he actually remains on the grid. He has 10 penalty points accrued over the last 5 races. It ain't looking good. I think if Hülkenberg wasn't driving for Audi next season, or for Sauber next season, then it'll be Audi. For sure, Magnussen would not be in a seat. Behrman would be replacing him. But the fact that Behrman's coming in for Hülkenberg, effectively, we believe, means that Magnussen may have a drive, although it may make more sense just to replace him as well, because, you know, despite the fact that he has tenure in the sport and is a veteran, he's not driving like he is in recent times, and Hülkenberg is basically beating him up again this season. And here's Ollie Behrman, 19 years old today. He will be in the Haas, I believe, in a free practice session at Imola in a couple of weekends' time, but he will also be in a Ferrari in just a couple of days' time in very interesting fashion. So Pier Giuseppe Donadoni and the other boys at Formula Uno were reporting a very interesting development at Ferrari yesterday, and he was asked the question, Adrian, Newey, is he joining? And he's like, no, come on, calm down. We're not going to get an update on Newey to Ferrari probably for some time. I don't think Newey's made his mind up yet. I made the point a few videos ago that I think he might wait to see what the technical regulations are looking like for 2026 before then deciding what he wants to do. And there's interest from Williams that maybe Newey sees in an exciting project, a real challenge that would be to get them back to the top, or at least try and make some progress over there. I think Ferrari does make the most sense, to be perfectly honest, but there's no update on that as it stands, and that's probably understandable. But there will be a filming day for the SF24 at Fiorano just ahead of Imola. Ollie Behrman is going to drive the car there, and this is honestly pretty masterfully played by Ferrari on paper. You're allowed to do a certain amount of filming days and testing days on your own back during the course of the season. Why not use it at the opportune moment when you've got a major upgrade package in the works? They will also be testing not on the SF24, this year's car, but on the F175, which was the 2022 car, of course the one that started the season so promisingly. They will test the new mud flaps. So if you guys aren't familiar with this idea, the wet races have been a disaster in Formula 1 for the last couple of seasons. Certainly the ground effect hasn't helped. Probably the bigger tyres haven't helped either. But the spray nowadays in wet weather is immense. You can't see the guy in front of you. And it just means that any severe rainfall, even just moderate to heavy rainfall, pretty much means we red flag the session and the drivers have to go back to the pits. It also makes the wet tyre totally useless, because if the conditions are wet enough that the wet tyre is faster than the intermediates, the conditions are unraceable because nobody can see anything because of all the spray. That's why, first of all, the wet is a bad tyre anyway that Pirelli have made, but also the inters are used all the time. Like Japan, what was it, 2023, when everyone did one lap on the wets after the safety car came in, put on the inters straight away, apart from like Mick Schumacher or something, it was left out there on the wets and was getting swallowed up. So, this is a problem. It needs to be solved. They've thought of an idea using these, what they call mud flaps, but effectively a spray dampening device at the back of the car that you can actually clamp on. So do a pit stop, and in the same way that you can adjust the front wing flap during a pit stop for a second or so, you could theoretically clamp on a wheel cover to prevent the spray. This is the theoretical idea here, where the current spray is like this, and then the theoretical spray is like this, which would make the visibility not as problematic for the car behinds. The issue is they tried this, a version 1 of it, I think it was at Silverstone last year on the Mercedes, and it didn't work. It failed emphatically, and it was back to the drawing board for the designers. So now they're going to try again. They've got a second version of this. They're going to use it on the F175 over the coming days at Fiorano, and we'll see if it's going to work. They're going to, probably drench the track, see if it works better than the previous version, and hopefully it does, because I think this would be a good idea for the sport. But frankly, I don't have all that much confidence that is going to be the case. So Ferrari are bringing their major upgrade package to Imola, and they are perfectly timing their filming day ahead of that. So it is going to be a substantial modification. There's even rumours today of a Red Bull styled side pod. I think it was a big talking point really when this Ferrari was first unveiled at the start of the season. it looked pretty, I wouldn't say it looked mid, but, you know, and obviously it's fast, and it's won a race already this season in the hands of Carlos Sainz at Australia, but it didn't look like it had any, you know, dramatic aerodynamic modifications. It looked like a pretty standard car. There wasn't any crazy standout features like there were on the other cars, most certainly. So the feeling was, all right, that's going to be version 1.0, and we're going to get version, you know, 2.0, 1.1, whatever, in due course. That is arriving for Imola, a substantial package. There's talk about the side pods being reshaped into another kind of way and upgrading multiple areas of the car. This is an upgrade that's been talked about probably being more extreme than the McLaren upgrade was in Miami. That McLaren upgrade brought them 0.4 of a second, we believe. They changed like 9 or 10 things on the car, but they said, yeah, this is going to be a big upgrade for us, McLaren, in Miami, but it's not going to be as big as the one was in Austria last year. And Ferrari are like, yeah, this is pretty massive. It's a substantial package. It's a great package, whatever they're going to say. So ahead of the Grand Prix, they are using their filming day tokens now. They're going to host 2 filming days with all the kilometers they can rack up. I imagine Charles Leclerc, Sainz and Behrman are going to be in the car driving around, gathering data on the new upgrade package. So this is pretty perfect. They get the time to test it in these conditions. Okay, sure, it's not at Imola, but going into the Grand Prix, this is always a concern when you bring a massive upgrade package that, well, we've got 3 hours of practice. How much can we do in that time? That was, to be fair, what impressed me about the McLaren was the fact that they dropped into the track at Miami. They had 1 hour of practice and immediately were on the pace and looked rapid pretty much the entire weekend, which shows that the simulation tools that McLaren are using are pretty damn on the money with the way they sell at their car. Ferrari would love to be in the same boat, and 3 hours of practice in Imola, a circuit that is very well known, is probably perfect. But still, getting 2 whole filming days in advance to make sure your package is well adjusted to those conditions, then turning up to Imola with 3 hours of practice puts them in a rather good position. And Fred Vasseur has made it very clear they believe, Ferrari, that they will fight with Red Bull every single weekend. And there would have been a time over the last few years that I said, oh yeah, Ferrari, they're talking up their upgrades again. We've heard this before, right? But over the last 12 months or so, it's a different Ferrari we're looking at. Last year, the Japan upgrade, the fact that they actually were closer to Red Bull at the end of last season than they were at the start was a promising sign, and a sign we haven't seen from a Ferrari team in a very long time. The car also needs to be stable in Imola because there are some track changes. This is a comparison, very interesting one actually, that was done between 2022 when we last raced there and 2024. You guys can see that at turn 9, this is at the top of the hill after sector 1, so you go through the chicane at the end of sector 1, the slow hairpin up the hill. This is that turn 9. They have eliminated the runoff, which I actually think is a great thing for the sport. We know that track limits are a massive problem, and back in the day, track limits were self-policing, because if you were 4 tyres over the line, you were on the gravel, and you did not want to be out there. Lately, they've done a couple of options. They've either added the terrible sausage curbs, which is just atrocious, or they're bringing back some more gravel traps, which I think is a good idea. Ideally, to me, it's like you do gravel, and then you do some tarmac, because I think gravel was considered to be a bit too dangerous, so they kind of got rid of it. But if you do gravel and then tarmac, that's probably fine. Or, in this case, you just do gravel. And that works for me as well, because the asphalt runoff at turn 9 is gone. At Aqua Minerale, they've reduced the tarmac runoff, so you can not run particularly wide here at all. And then at the chicane at the top of the hill, again, turn 14, 15, this is entirely gravel now, rather than runoff. So, you know, you cannot get away with exceeding track limits, which I think is absolutely the way to do it. And it makes the circuit way more punishing if drivers make a mistake, which I think is always a good thing anyway. So, yeah, interesting changes for this year's Grand Prix. Ferrari were apparently targeting mainly their slow speed performance with these upgrades, and there's also been talk from Adrian Newey that kind of raises questions as to how dominant Red Bull are going to be for the rest of the season, because Newey mentioned, we talked about this interview with Sky Sports yesterday, but he actually said in the interview there's always room for improvement, always searching for bits and pieces. There's one feature on the RB20 that I am not terribly happy with this year, and that's something that will either change later in the year or probably more likely altered next year. Now, Newey's gone as of like now from the Formula 1 side. So, you know, that's something the rest of the team will address. But it's interesting to hear Newey say, and you can speculate on what this feature of the car is. They are struggling at times with some tyre warm-up and stuff like this at the front, but they kind of had that last year as well. What this feature might be, the Newey, you know, not terribly happy with, is if you're British and you say that, he basically means he hates it, to be honest. This makes me think that there is some sort of integral weakness in that car that can be exploited at certain circuits, probably most of them they'll dominate, but certain tracks do seem to make the Red Bull slightly more difficult to set up, and Newby's kind of implying, at least if I'm Ferrari, if I'm McLaren, if I'm reading this, I'm thinking, that fantastic. We've got a chance this season to actually do something interesting. Now, AMUS also, though, reporting on the contractual situation at Mercedes. We know that Hamilton signed a 1+1 deal for 2024 and 2025, but the 2024 contract, obviously he's running that to its conclusion, then he made the decision himself to exit the contract at that 1 point rather than take the +1. But that contract was also open to be changed from the other side. That is the interesting part of this. Mercedes with Hamilton were not particularly keen, for whatever reason, to get him onto a long-term deal. Hamilton wanted a 2+1. He wanted something that gave him confidence going into the new cycle regulations, and Hamilton was not offered that by Mercedes. He wasn't offered the ambassadorship that it seems that he wanted, and Verstappen is getting offered by Toto Wolff to go over there now. Ferrari gave Hamilton what he wanted. He obviously decided to cut the contract short and call it a day. The belief as to why Mercedes did this was related to the Kimi Antonelli situation, the fact that they see him as a prodigal talent next up in Formula 1. They wanted to ensure Mercedes they had room for him if he arrived on the scene. Hamilton has made room for him by leaving of his own accord, and arguably a Russell-Antonelli partnership makes a fair bit of sense. We've also talked about the possibility, what if Sainz was to come in, theoretically outperform Russell, and then they want to put Antonelli in the car, who gets the seat at that point? We said the same thing as well with the likes of Fernando Alonso when he was rumoured to be joining the team. So that raises the question, what about this from Russell's POV and also from a potential Verstappen POV? Now, I think Russell is the man that Toto Wolff wants to kind of lead the team, but how much confidence do Mercedes really have that that's going to happen? The reports are that an internal note at Mercedes has basically 92% support of bringing in Verstappen. Basically, Mercedes want Verstappen. Why wouldn't you? But also shows to me that there might not be that much confidence at Mercedes that Russell is really going to be able to be the man to spearhead their revival in the same way that Lewis Hamilton spearheaded all their championship victories for many years. After Hamilton's departure, how's it going to go? The feeling is that maybe Hamilton does more work in terms of, testing new setups and ideas and bringing things to the table than Russell does, who's kind of more happy just to drive the car as it is. So there's question as to whether Russell can be the leader. He makes more mistakes than Hamilton does, obviously, and, fair few crashes over the last year or so in critical moments. If Verstappen was to decide, which he won't, probably, but if he was to come in, either a 2026 as well as a possibility, but even in the shorter term, what does that mean for Russell, especially if Toto really wants to put Antonelli in the car? And maybe Russell, I think he has proved himself that he's a strong driver, he's a great qualifier, but on certain weekends he is still lacking, and he does make more mistakes than he really should at this point. But of course he's won a race over the last 3 seasons, which Hamilton hasn't, so it could end up badly for Russell given that his contract is far less secure than it could have been. But it also could end up well for Russell if the situation was to arise, because we've never talked about the Russell to Red Bull possibility, but maybe it's something that's not worth entirely ruling out, just because Red Bull are looking at Sainz, obviously. Horner sees a possibility where Verstappen departs. Probably not for next year, because as we've said, the only way it makes sense for Verstappen to depart is to go to Mercedes. And why would you go to Mercedes now? There's no evidence to suggest that's a good idea. But the possibility of Max leaving for 2026's season and regulation change is absolutely on the cards, I would say. And that is possibly why Red Bull are really looking at Sainz to say, well, if we upgrade on Perez, that might be a good idea just in the event that Max leaves, we need a stronger driver elsewhere. And Russell could be in a similar conversation, right? Like, would Russell go to Red Bull even next season if they offered him a spot and drive alongside Max? I think he would. I think Russell's been clear that he believes he's as good as Max and could beat him in the same car. And fair play for Russell thinking that, because many drivers don't have that kind of mentality. And I think that is the mentality you need to win, even if I don't really believe that Russell's quite got that in him to do that. But I still think Russell's better than most people believe that he is, to be fair. But I think this contractual situation is definitely one to watch going forwards, because, Russell, Verstappen, the Red Bull debate is actually not out of the question at the moment. So very much into your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Just one final thing to mention here, thought was pretty nice here from Lando Norris, just his quotation that he put up on Instagram here discussing the most insane couple of days. I literally haven't stopped smiling since lap 33, he says. And I thought that was pretty funny, just because I'm sure most of his fans, people that wanted him to win, were absolutely not smiling during that period and were stressing out of their minds. But Lando even said after the race that after he pulled a bit of a gap on Max, he knew he had enough pace. Like, it was very clear that he had what it takes to win that Grand Prix. He knew that Max didn't have the pace, race, and he was very satisfied with driving home for the victory. So yeah, maybe I do believe that he was smiling, maybe not lap 33, but closer to the end, I imagine that he was relatively satisfied. Although I imagine his family and friends at home were absolutely petrified of what could have happened in the final few laps. So I'd very much interested your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.